Welcome to Making Worlds, conversations about imagining otherwise. I'm Hannah McGregor, and on this show, I talk to cool people about fantasy, sci-fi, speculative fiction, magical realism, and I guess comedy sketch shows that let us envision different possibilities for how the world could be. And spoiler, on this episode, we're talking about a comedy sketch show. Specifically, I am going to talk with author and comedian and one of my best friends, Dina Del Bucchia, about the sketch comedy show I Think You Should Leave. Dina Del Bucchia, pronouns she, her, is a writer, podcaster, literary event host, editor, and creative writing instructor. She has written a book of short stories and 6 books of poetry, including her latest, You're Gonna Love This, which, spoiler, I did in fact deeply love and think you should all read. We are going to be talking about I Think You Should Leave in general today, but we are also going to talk about 2 sketches in particular. And so if you have never, even if you've never seen a second of this show before, I want you to pause right now and go watch these 2 sketches because you will have a much better time having watched them first, and I don't want to spoil them for you. So the sketches that you should watch are Baby Cries and Driver's Ed. So go. Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed them. We are going to be talking about how I Think You Should Leave opens new opportunities for comedic narratives and exemplifies a type of punching up that isn't often seen in comedy. And we're going to talk about the importance of a weird feral little guy representation. So let's go meet Dina. Hi, Dina.
Hi, Hannah.
Thanks so much for coming on Making Worlds to talk to me about I Think You Should Leave.
Just kidding. I'm not going anywhere.
Ooh, she did a visual bit, folks. That's why you gotta watch the video version. You're just listening to the audio, you're missing all these bits.
Oh, you're not even ready for what I'm going to do.
Okay, so Dina, I think our topic this month might be one that leaves people going, sorry, how is that speculative fiction? So I think we're probably going to need to start off by doing some arguing for fit. But before we do that, can you give folks who aren't familiar with it just a real high level overview of what I Think You Should Leave is?
I Think You Should Leave is a sketch comedy show that airs on Netflix. If you've heard of Netflix, you have the option to watch it. Also, a lot of the episodes are on YouTube, or the sketches are on YouTube, so you can enjoy them there. But it is a sketch comedy show, and it's unique because it's extremely short. A lot of sketch comedy shows I think we're exposed to are much longer. Like Saturday Night Live is an hour and a half show on like basic regular cable, or in living color, or even like Black Lady Sketch Show, which is on HBO. There's a lot of examples. So if people don't know what sketch comedy is, sketches are short, scripted, comedic scenes, stories. Yeah.
Yeah. So I Think You Should Leave is characterized by shorter sketches than normal.
Yes. And each individual episode of the show is like, I think the longest one is 18 minutes.
Yeah, they're
So
short episodes.
They're a lot shorter than most shows. And so there's between like 5 and 7 sketches, depending. Some are very short, some are longer, but they're all a few minutes long.
And why does that feel significant to you in terms of the show's place in the larger realm of sketch comedy?
I feel like the difference for me with this particular show is that after every episode, I'm like, not enough. Like, you are truly doing that thing in entertainment where you are making people want more. And I think that is not, again, there are some other sketch comedy shows, again, like Black Lady Sketch Show, or I think even Mr. Show with Bob and David, that were shorter pieces.
Baroness von Sketch is sometimes very short.
Baroness von Sketch, a lot of their sketches are like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So I think we've kind of evolved to that level, but there's definitely something about having a just a whole episode that is so short, leaving you wanting more. And each season, there are 3 seasons, and each season is only 6 episodes, which is again extremely short.
That is extremely
Yeah,
short. And yet, within these extremely short episodes and extremely short seasons, I think You Should Leave has really done some remarkable world building, that you see reflected out in the world around the kind of fandom that has emerged around the show. So how would you describe the world building work of I Think You Should Leave? What makes it so world buildy as a series?
great question. I also want to say that the show itself, the memification of the show has actually transcended the fandom in a way. So there are people using like regular memes. People are using images or videos from the show, but without any context. They have not a clue. They have not a clue.
It's just a pig in a Richard Nixon
It's
mask.
just a pig in a Richard Nixon match. It's just a guy in a hot dog costume. Like, yeah, like the language of the show, I think, is what does the world building. Um, Not just the characters, like the concept of the show is the idea that in every sketch there is someone that should leave because their behavior is bad, because something weird is happening. So it could be that that person should leave because they're doing something inappropriate or strange, or like someone else should leave because they don't want to be there anymore.
I don't want to be here anymore.
I don't even want to be here anymore. Yeah, I mean, one character really does say that in a sketch. I don't even want to be here. There's something to be said just for conceptually the world building. Like the show is conceptual in that that ties everything together. One of the things that is a hallmark of the show for me is this something that isn't always common with comedy, especially broader comedy, whereas this show is the specificity of language is goes really really hard. So it's not merely that a character is describing the way they live their life. The actual content, every single word, every piece of that holds some kind of meaning or like incredibly vivid description.
Can you give us an example, like of a particular sketch you have in mind?
Absolutely. And there is one sketch that we are going to talk about today. The sketch, I think itself is actually called Baby Cries, but I always just call it either Sloppy Steaks or I Used to Be a Piece of Shit.
I think of it as the Dangerous Nights sketch.
Yeah, it's also Dangerous Nights. I mean, that's the thing, that each sketch holds a world in it. But when they all tie together, there's kind of this world of these people. As I think I said, and you might bring this up again, but as I said when I was doing my little intake interview form, like it's just a bunch of weird little guys trying to make it. And like whether it's make it out of a particular scene, make it out of their lives, like make it out of a few seconds in time. That's kind of what the show is. So to me, I think the world building aspect ties into the way these characters, even though the individual situations, as I said, are very specific, the language is very specific to each scene, they have like weird hopes and dreams and they want to achieve something and they are trying to push for something. And so it's really strange to be talking about something that clearly is, I mean, there are plenty of sketches that do actually, I think, have expressly sci-fi or fantasy or speculative fiction aspects. Like there's literally a race of aliens that comes down at one point and all they care about is motorcycles. They just want to make sure that Earth has motorcycles. That's their primary concern. And I just think that's so beautiful because I love when we play with our concept of what sort of a cultural idea is. Like we have a cultural idea about aliens, and then these aliens come down and they're like, motorcycle, yeah. Even within that, like the language for these, they're aliens, they're on a spaceship, they know the word motorcycle, they care about the the concept of the motorcycle.
Let's jump into talking about the specific sketch
Sure.
so that we can sort of, apply some of these ideas about the world building work to a particular example. And the example we have collaboratively selected is Baby Cries. Could you summarize it for us?
So the sketch takes place at a baby shower, and the baby is present. So clearly, whoever is hosting it, this is my interpretation, believes in the superstition you do not get baby gifts before your baby is born. So again, this is context clues for me. So the baby is there, and there's friends and family, and there's a table full of gifts, and sort of the main character in this particular sketch, everyone's oohing and eyeing. The baby's so cute. Baby is very cute. And he wants to hold the baby. So he does hold the baby, and the baby immediately starts crying. And kind of the rest of the sketch revolves around the idea that this guy's like, well, the baby's crying because he could tell that I used to be a piece of shit.
At one point, he goes up to the baby's mother and says, I'm worried that your baby thinks people can't change.
It's an incredible line. It's so funny. And so it kind of, that's the premise, is this adult man who thinks this baby is judging him, but also he's kind of like, it almost feels like he's in this moment ready to admit that he did used to be a piece of shit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the sketch as a whole sort of figures the baby as like a witness
Yes,
to
absolutely.
this man and the bad choices he used to make and the way he's trying to be better. Like there's a sort of flashback at the end where
Yeah.
he sees the baby sitting on a beach watching
Mhm.
him, and it is a very surreal,
Oh,
verging on
absolutely.
sci-fi moment that positions this baby that at the beginning you were like, oh yeah, this baby's just there to facilitate a socially awkward situation, and by the end the baby has become this like spiritual figure, seeing that he used to be a piece of shit and forgiving him for it.
It's like literally the baby starts the sketch crying and ends the sketch on the beach with a bunch of dudes with slicked back hair, Henley shirts, and just open vests, drinking like
Champagne.
Veuve Clicquot. Yeah. Like swirling it around. And then this baby like laughs and smiles at them. An acknowledgement.
An acknowledgement. The baby
An
sees
acknowledgement. The
them.
baby's like, I see you, and this is who you were, and I understand you, I forgive you. The baby also is a dowsing rod in a way, because it
For
also,
pieces of shit.
yes, and it also identifies another character, the baby's
The
grandfather,
baby's
who
grandfather, yeah.
also used to be a piece of shit, which he also admits.
Yes, absolutely. And in your description of what the baby is seeing, you get at another one of the really crucial things about the sketch, which is the deep specificity of
Yes.
what makes somebody a piece of shit. Because it is not the same for our protagonist and for the
No.
grandfather,
No.
but they are presented. So what are they for the protagonist? It's
The protagonist, it's like slick back hair, white Ferrari, live for New Year's Eve. Then
and
later on, he
sloppy
says like
steaks.
sloppy steaks at Trefani's. That's where you take, you get a steak and you just dump a glass of water on it.
And then the grandfather's is spiked up blonde hair.
Spiked up blonde hair, itty bitty jeans, chicken spaghetti at Ciccolini's.
Chicken
Again,
spaghetti at Ciccolini's. It's poetry.
it's poetry. I agree. I think so much of this show is poetry, and it also speaks to that aspect of comedy that connects to poetry in terms of thinking about rhythm, thinking about meter, thinking about rhyme, thinking about just literally how language is used so similarly in both those forms. And they are two forms that are very close to me, that are very important to me. I hope everyone is enjoying the sun playing on my face right now.
Again, you just gotta be watching the video for this. It's pretty magical.
But I think you're absolutely correct. So it's the language and the specificity, and that ties into, I think, a lot of other things we're going to talk about with another sketch that we're going to address. But absolutely, like the specificity of the scene is, there's like even the the specificity to the detail where a joke is built around the idea that someone says, your hair looks slick back now, and he's like, you think this is slick back? This is
It's
push
push
back.
back.
Like the just minute detail of slicked back versus pushed back. And to me, the sketch kind of embodies something that really ties to the concept of this podcast, to making worlds, which is that people can change. And it's not just that the baby sees that people used to be a piece of shit. It's that this character admits, a man, a white middle-aged man admits he used to be a piece of shit. An older man admits he used to be a piece of shit. And then they are talking about change. Like the idea of, and at one point he says, I did a lot of work. You know, like there's a tender masculinity that plays in this in the weirdest way that I think is also crucial for understanding kind of like what for me is important on kind of sort of like a cultural emotional level, in addition to it being one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life.
One of the things that is so interesting about Tim Robinson as a comic performer is the way that he sort of parodically embodies a kind of toxic masculinity in order to allow it to be torn down over and over and over and over. Um, Often by his own character's realization that what is happening right now is awful. I don't even want to be here anymore.
Yeah, yeah. That you have put yourself in a position that is untenable.
And usually you put yourself there.
Yes. I also just, speaking of Tim Robinson, he is like a guy from Detroit. He comes from like a working class, very blue collar city. And I think so much of what he does on the show is through the lens of someone who is now living in Los Angeles, potentially has been in there's a lot of office culture sketches in the show. And like, I think the lens of the show comes from that space, which I also find very fascinating. Like, if you're blue collar, you're, or you're working class, I think there's a lot of emphasis on not being tender and on like reinforcing toxic masculinity, but at the same time you're up against things like you know, you're pro union, you have all these ideas. So I don't know, I mean, I might be drawing too much into this, but like it is
No such
really,
thing.
yeah, that's the kind of, again, I grew up in like a very small industrial town, and so I don't know, I feel like sometimes even though our lenses are different, I feel close to um that lens, to that way of seeing the world, you know, in a like, you know, literally, I've lived in a rural place and I've lived in a city. I've never lived in the suburbs. I could not tell you what they're like. They sound insane.
Let's talk about the second sketch. Tables. What's it actually called?
It's
Driver's
actually
Ed?
called Driver's Ed.
But it's, for me, will always be tables.
Tables. No, tables, perfect.
Okay, so can
It's
you give
about
us
tables.
a brief overview of this one?
Yes. And this features, again, two real heavy hitters in the show and in comedy in general right now. Tim Robinson is playing a driver's ed teacher who is introducing a video to his students. And the video is about distracted driving. And we both are in the classroom space, and then we are also in the space of the driver's ed video, which stars Patty Harrison, maybe one of the best comedians alive,
Yeah.
who is distracted. And the thing that is distracting her is that her tables are dirty. And that's kind of like all you really get as you in the first part of this sketch.
And the students in the driver's ed class become obsessed with this detail
Yes.
about the tables. Like, why are there tables there? What is her job? Um her job is tables.
Yeah. And then he keeps reiterating her job is tables.
Yeah. And the driver's ed videos become sort of the locus for this tension
Yes.
between the instructor and his students, because they are obsessed with
Yeah.
understanding what is happening within the reality of this world they're being shown. And he's insisting that they don't ask any follow-up questions
Yeah.
about what is clearly a profoundly strange alternate reality
Oh,
being
yeah.
generated for us.
Absolutely. And what I love about the framing of this sketch is that the students, the youth of the sketch are the ones who are a voice of reason. And the adults, both in the classroom and in the driver's ed video that they're supposed to be learning from, are absolutely in their own world. They are doing something that beyond reasonable in both of these situations. And the students just want clarity.
Yeah, they're just
They're like,
asking for an explanation.
why am I not allowed to understand what is happening? And the breadcrumbs, I also like that they kind of, to me, this sketch is like the mystery sketch of the show, because
Yeah,
the
because
students are,
we also want to know what
yes, we
the
want to
tables
know.
are.
And the students are the proxy for the viewer. And they're like, why can't we discover the answer to this question, which is, what is her job? What is with these tables? And it
Yeah,
turns
the
out by
tables are her livelihood.
the tables are her livelihood. The tables are her corn. And if you were a farmer and she came and started kicking your corn, you'd be pretty mad. So the tables are her corn. There's three sketches, or three videos within the sketch, which is great. It plays into this rule of three thing in comedy. So it's a great illustrative thing if you teach comedy like I do. Like, you're like, oh, well, the rule of three. And by the third one, a third character comes in, a third adult character comes in and like explains the situation for the viewer and for the students. And they're so excited to get this news. It's honestly like, yeah, it's a very euphoric moment. And again, another thing I love about this show, like the most absurd thing that you discover becomes the thing that gives you that euphoria, that joy, that like, yes.
Yes, 100%. And it's like the deep weirdness of these videos.
Yes.
Again, like it's so interesting how much of the sketch itself is about viewers paying attention to the wrong thing.
Yes.
Like that
Yes.
it is also about like how you watch things and what lens you bring to them.
Yes.
And it almost ends up functioning like a kind of key to watching the series as a
Yeah.
whole, which is like,
Absolutely.
don't pay attention to the thing you think you're supposed to be
Yes.
paying attention to. Pay attention to the thing that seems really weird to you.
And I mean, it's such a great example of like, if you're talking to students, you want them to have a critical eye, and these students are, and they are like constantly getting yelled at.
Yeah, a
Like,
disciplinarian teacher is
yeah,
saying, don't
absolutely.
ask questions about this text I'm showing you. And they're like, sorry, we just need to know what's up with the tables.
And again, just to think about language, there's a like a flustered behavior that the teacher starts exhibiting, and it comes out in language as well. At one point he says, I can't know how to hear any more about tables, which is just the weirdest construction of words.
Like, I really recommend borrowing it for whatever
I
you're
can't know
feeling,
how to hear any more about insert whatever.
whatever that thing is. But
Yeah.
saying, I can't know how to hear anything more about.
No, it's not any. I can't say anything. I can't know how to hear any more about blank.
I
Like,
can't know how to hear any more about. It's
it works every time.
Shakespearean.
It is. It absolutely is. There's another part where he's telling them they really have to pay attention or they're not going to learn how to drive. And he says, you want to walk to the food store? You want to walk to the house? Which again, just like there's something there tapping into the idea, like this prototype of like a middle-aged driver's ed teacher who's like, using the article in that way is so specific and so silly. Also, calling the grocery store the food store. It kills me. You want to walk to the food store?
Okay, so in the second part, I want to talk about the way that this imagined world shows up for you in your life. So, you've been gesturing towards, I think, a lot of the really powerful themes in this series, but let's just start with like, what does I think you should leave mean to you?
There's something about the actual creation of the show for me that I really love and speaks um, to like both how I see the world, but also how I think about creation, how I think about collaboration, all of those things. Like it's this extremely lovely group of people that the creators, Zach Kanan and Tim Robinson, pull together. And it also is a show that for me it really exemplifies punching up while still being extremely funny. And and it's not like it's doing a reversal. I was talking to our mutual friend Megan about this, and she said that it's not even like about subverting or making fun of like the jock or doing something, or these guys are like nerds that are triumphing. Like it has nothing to do with that. It's literally just about addressing those like bad behavior.
You're right, because it's not types. It's not like, oh,
It's not at
this type.
all. It's
It's
not
like,
at all.
that's not a type.
No, that's I guess too, like speaking of sort of the larger world of it, like none of these people are types. They are the most singular weirdos that you will ever encounter. And I think that to me also speaks to just the world I want to live in. Like, thinking about even the concept of like jocks or whatever, like those people don't even exist in this world. Like, we are just living in a world where everyone is kind of allowed to embrace their absolute strangest desire or be free with uh the mistakes they have made too. Like there are so many failures in this show, there are so many mistakes that people make, and on one level there's like just kind of an assumption that like in real life people make mistakes and do these things and they just get to like, yes, there are some kinds of consequences, but they get to continue living and like experiencing the world.
Yeah, that it isn't like, it's like you can be the nastiest, weirdest little freak who fucks up in the most possible ways, and the consequence is like your mom comes to pick you up from the adult haunted house tour and you didn't make any friends
You
again.
made no friends.
You made no friends.
You made no friends.
No. But like, you don't there's no level of freaky little weirdo, socially awkward, outcast, absolute human fuck up that you can be in this series that excludes you. And that is cathartic, isn't it?
It totally is cathartic. And another sketch that we're not talking about, but that I think about a lot, is a sketch that closes. I think the sketches that close each season are also very significant. Like the first season, there's a sketch that closes the season, that's ostensibly centered around a intervention for someone's alcohol problem, but the person who hosts it has just bought a house that's completely decorated with Garfield paraphernalia, including a couch and a Odie chair that like the tongue comes out. And so you literally are in this world where you're like, is this real? Like, how are we living here? But it ends in this way where you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of actually a very heightened representation of every awkward encounter you have to have every single day. And then in the final episode of the second season is one of my favorite sketches, which is set at Claire's. And these young kids are watching this video because they want to get their ears pierced, but also like
And
an
it's the
older.
like safety video that you have to
Yes,
watch before you get your ears
yes,
pierced.
you have to watch it so that you like understand what you're getting into and the safety and the cleaning, and to also like prepare you. And there's also an older guy getting his ear pierced, but in the video there's this like much older man who was interviewed alongside all these young kids who have gotten their ears pierced and they're just like delighted. They're having this beautiful time. And this guy's having like a full on existential crisis. And that's part of the video these children have to watch. And again, I'm just like, this is so funny and so dark and absolutely the direction this show was leading me in. And I'm fine with like it ending here for the until 2 years from now when I get more episodes, you know? Like to me, those sketches are like very extreme dark and light together. So it's very tonal connectivity for me. As opposed to um but again, also I do think still like there's an existential aspect in both of them of just like, you know, people having a crisis. Like the person who bought this house thought it was owned by Jim Davis, but it actually was owned by this person who tried to kill Jim Davis. So it even escalates further to be like, oh, this is actually very upsetting. You know what? I think for me, those things are like, these are like poems to me. They have these turns like a poem does, a volta, whatever you want to call it. That play into those final moments and you're like, wow, I feel changed.
How does this like transformative possibility of strange uh these really strange comedic sketches, like how does that play out for you in your life?
I think it's interesting that this show isn't necessarily overtly hopeful, but I don't think that's bad. I actually have a really hard time with media that's overtly hopeful because I find that it is often missing nuance and often humor that I wish that it had. I think a lot of really humorless pieces of art are very hopeful, and I don't know that you can have like more than maybe 30% hope in something comedic.
That's science, folks.
Hey, I'm a scientist. I'm not. Please don't tell anyone that. But I think the idea that just being able to laugh is such a freeing experience, and to so consistently laugh when I think the emotional stakes are so high, but the actual stakes are so strange is very, again, that's very freeing. Like, and I think that's part of why it feels transformative for me, because having the freedom as a person enjoying a piece of art to enjoy something that has all of these different emotions and tones together. um I mean, that's the kind of art I'm drawn to generally. um I don't know. I now I sound like a snob. I'm like, I don't like this one-dimensional art. It sucks. But I mean, I don't. I just don't. Like, people can talk all they want about like reality TV or the Real Housewives or whatever and how it's meaningful to you in some way, but it's not the same. Like the release of this feels meaningful because we are also weird little guys, right? And so getting to observe it and laugh at it and with it, like I don't necessarily even think, I think we are identifying with the deep anxiety and like nervousness and all of these things that the characters are experiencing, and that's why it's meaningful.
I love the way you put it, that the stakes feel emotionally high, but in actual fact are so weird, right? That it's not that the stakes are low in these situations. It's like we are making things much, much harder for ourselves.
They're just so unfamiliar. Like the stakes are high, but the actual situation is so unfamiliar to us because we do not experience it in our daily lives.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And yet, in the way of speculative fiction, like the scenarios are so weird that it allows them to say something true
Yeah.
about the profound weirdness of trying to navigate the world on a day-to-day basis.
I feel like it connects in some ways to like my other interests. Like it's very George Saunders-ish. It's very Miranda July. Like You know,
Oh
if I
yeah,
could, if I could,
you've got a
yeah,
type.
I really have a type.
All right, Dina, we are going to end today's episode by playing a little game. That game is called MASH. Are you familiar?
Yeah. Mansion, apartment, shack, house.
Yes. So this is for listeners slash viewers who might not be familiar. This is a game that we used to play when we were young before there was computers.
We used a pen and some paper.
I will in fact use a computer to do it today, but so what this is a game to help determine your future. Um Often in the past it would be how many children you're going to have and what kind of car you'd have, but we have customized this to make it I think you should leave themed. So, you are going to find out what your job, spouse, hobby, and look are going to be. And I'm going to give you all of the choices just so that people know what the categories are. So, under jobs, we've got 1, tables, 2, a hot dog man who drives a hot dog car, 3, host of Baby of the Year, or 4, summer loving contestant who just wants to ride the zip line.
Just here for the zip line. Honestly, all of those are perfect.
Under spouses, we have Carl Havoc, Mitch Bryant, Sloppy Mud Pie Jacob, or Howie. Under looks, we have shirts with extremely complicated patterns.
Just like this one.
Extremely complicated. They cost more when the patterns are more complicated. We've got slicked back hair, white bathing suit, sloppy steaks.
Beautiful.
We've got sewn into the pants of the Charlie Brown float at the Thanksgiving Day parade.
Oh, now I want that.
Or a fedora with safari flaps in the back.
Really good.
And finally, under hobbies, we have judge for the 2025 Little Buff Boys competition.
Little Buff Boys. Okay.
We've got going on adult haunted house tours. Updating the Calico Cut Pants website. Or playing feed eggs while on your lunch break.
Wow. This is so funny.
What I need you to do, Dina, is choose a number between 3 and 10.
I choose the number 6.
Okay, so our number is 6. And now I know how to do this, and Gabby's gonna do a like a time cut sound effect, and then we'll come back and I will announce what your final results are. Okay, Dina.
Okay, I'm ready.
We're ready with your results. When you grow up, you are going to live in a mansion. Your job is going to be summer loving contestant, just here for the zip lines. Your spouse, Mitch Bryant. Your look, fedora with safari flaps in the back. And your hobby, playing feed eggs while on your lunch break.
This is so beautiful. I feel like I need to make like a dream board with those
things. A vision board.
A vision board.
Vision boards, another kind of speculative fiction writing. Thanks so much, Dina.
Thank you. I couldn't be happier.
Making Worlds is a Witch Please production. Since you are watching this, that means you are most likely already one of our Patreon supporters. Because of you, we are able to sustainably make Material Girls and Making Worlds. If you want more Witch Please Productions content, you can head over to our website at owitchplease.ca to access our transcripts, reading lists, and some gorgeous merch. You can also follow us on Instagram at @OhWitchPlease, and we have a Substack where you can read our monthly newsletter, The Monthly Hoot, and our special behind the episode content. A huge thank you to the people behind the scene making all of this possible. Our producer, Zoe Mix, our associate producer and editor, Gabby Iori, our executive producer, Hannah Rehack, aka Coach, and of course, Marcel Cosman, co-founder of Witch Please Productions. Special thanks to Jay Arner and Jessica Delisle, who wrote our theme song and who have a wonderful new album out called Planet Perfect. Go listen to it right now. It's perfect. And thank you to Zoe Mix for designing our wonderful Making Worlds logo. We'll be back next month to talk about a whole new piece of media that asks us to imagine otherwise. Until then, subscribe to our YouTube channel for bonus content and tell your friends about us because we're having such a good time over here. Okay, bye.